Counting. Okay, there's a lot in this, and so I won't cover everything, and I'm gonna share screen. Wait, let's see if I can do this. Okay, so Phineas Finn, this is chapters 50 to 42. And I was going to do this in terms of the four loves of Phineas Finn and kind of echoing the four loves of Miss Effingham. But I didn't have time to, I'm really going to focus more on Violet and Madame Gessler. But he's here in the middle, and he's gotten himself kind of entangled in all four of these. This is these 13 chapters really are more about social events. Personal discussions about love and marriage predominate more than politics. And two of the big social events are the dinner of 16, followed by a reception with 500, where we are introduced to Madame Max Gessler, who's going to be a very important character. And then the next one will be at Matching Prairie, where the Duke of Omnium comes on the stage, and he and Madame Max start kind of a relationship. And the other big social thing is Violet Effingham finally decides. Politics, this is if we have time. The main thing is that Phineas is promoted. So is Lord Fitzgibbon to a higher position. But it's interesting, the reactions that Phineas gets from Bunce, from Mr. and Mrs. Lowe, which are very critical in a way, and the three women. And we'll talk maybe more about what Phineas promised Bunce about following his conscience, and yet later he doesn't. Okay. Here we go, Madame Max Marie Gessler. This is Barbara Murray, who played her in the series. I think the real Madame probably had more of a Mediterranean complexion, but Charlotte makes a big point that she has thick black hair, worn in curls hung down low below her face. And her eyes were dark blue, so bright, and she used them, unlike English women, to conquer you, to kind of know who you are. Her dark complexion was so brilliant, he thought. That's why I feel like she's probably more Mediterranean. Okay, she never wore anything because she's a widow from Austria. And trying to make her way, in a way, she is kind of like a Phineas, trying to make her way into British society. So she never bares her shoulder. She always wears black, but in this black are interwoven all of this red and yellow silk, so that it's actually rather a bright thing that you clothes. So she's trying to be discreet, but she's certainly not dressing to be a frump. Wears rubies. Here she's got pearls, but at least in that night she's got ruby earrings, a ruby brooch, and a ruby bracelets, and something around her neck. Now, this is something Lady Glencora has sponsored and has invited her, because otherwise she is not invited to society. We hear Lord Fawn make kind of a derogatory comments. We're bored about her. And even Lady Laura says, well, we're not advanced enough to have her to our house, partly because she's a widow, she's Austrian and Jewish, and her money she's got a lot of money. It comes from banking. Okay, so here is the dinner. And of course, Phineas is so in love with Violet and wants to go eat dinner with her, but he's given to Madame Max Gessler. And And he's like, oh, this is going to be awful. And yet, what happens? She is delightful and she knows so much. Mr. Finn, what would I not give to be a member of the British Parliament at such a moment as this? Like, why this moment? Because there is something that can be done. The great drawback to the life of women is that they cannot act in politics. And I love this. Politically, I should want to out Turnbull, to vote for everything that could be voted for. The ballot, manhood suffrage, unlimited right of striking, tenant right, and there is no S in the original, education of everybody, annual parliaments, and the abolition of at least the bench of bishops. Then she goes on to say she knows she's being a little too much, but there's just something refreshing about what she brings to this dinner. And then she can see that Phineas is paying attention to Violet, and she goes on to say, they say women never do admire women, but I most sincerely do admire Miss Effingham. She seems to me to be the most independent girl I ever knew in life. And the next chapter, we'll hear Violet say something similar, that she has this undying friendship with her. And it's interesting because they both are a little bit outsiders. Violet is more inside, but they both have to kind of weigh what they do and how they act. Now, to me, I love this comedy in the next chapter with Lord Fawn, and it's still the party, it's the reception after the dinner, and Phineas finally gets over to Violet, and they're all kind of stuck, and Lord Fawn is playing up to a Violet and says, to Phineas, why don't you ever come to see me? My aunt is quite blooming, and Fawn is evergreens may be said to bloom. And then she says, you come and see her, Mr. Finn, only you must bring a little money for the Female Protestant Unmarried Women's Immigration Society. This is a real society. And if I'm going to put something in the chat that kind of describes it, in the 1850 census, there was way too many women, and they needed to be married. And a lot of them were, respectable women. And so this was one of the ideas. But I love it how Violet says, it is a perilous affair for me, as my aunt wants me to go out as a sort of leading Protestant unmarried female immigrant pioneer myself. Fawn is like, oh, you don't mean that, with much anxiety. Phineas says, of course you'll go. I should if I were you. It is such a grand prospect, such an opening in life, so much excitement, and such a useful career. Fawn says as if there were not plenty of opening here for Miss Effingham. But it's just, to me, I liked how Phineas felt he and Violet could banter back and forth, whereas Lord Fawn is like, oh my God, how can you say these things to her, etc. And this is a book about that's really based on this. And later I put in the chat kind of a description about it. The newspapers, Parliament, everybody was concerned there's too many women and let's send them away. I don't think Violet would have survived. Okay. To me, it's the social scene is like a hunting scene, getting Violet married. But Violet is like a sly fox who eludes the hunter with her wit and deftness. She's playful and serious at the same time. And I found that in all her conversations, she doesn't want to get pinned down. She eventually will make a statement. But she, like Phineas in a way, agendas for her, what they want to do with her. And she, to me, is, because the stakes are higher, is more thoughtful about how she might be being manipulated than Phineas. Phineas, I think, tends to be pushed where he goes. One example is this thing with Lady Babcock. Oh yes, why, he is a particular friend of me, of mine, most especially, and A1, I might say, among young men. And A1 is evidently, I don't know what today's slang would be, but it really made Lady Babcock crazy and think that Violet has gone down to the streets in whatever. But it is interesting at the end, after kidding her aunt, she says, I will not be circumspect, as you call it, because of course, Lady Babcock was explaining that Mr. Phineas is nobody. And she says, and if Mr. Finn asked me to marry him tomorrow and I liked him well enough, I would take him. Even though he had been dug right out of a bog. But this man is not nothing. So she is kind of giving him up, but she does respect him. So then Lady Laura is going to help Phineas, because if you remember, after the duel, and Phineas asked her for help and she's sobbing away. She goes, and I must say, I find the conversations between Lady Laura and Violet upsetting at times. Laura seems like such a bully, and kind of keeps going at her. Anyway, she says that if you'd like to marry Phineas Finn, I'll say that you're right. And why am I to marry Phineas Finn? And then she says, where does this come from? And then she says, you've thrown over your brother. And Lady Laura says, well, is he going to keep on asking? And again, I love Violet's humor. I do not know why he should not, seeing how very little trouble it gives him. Half an hour once in 6 months does it all for him, allowing for coming and going in a cab. And so the sense that, yeah, Lord Chilton, who knows? He just does this every once in a while. But then they both agree that Phineas has tried Laura and me, and let's see who's going to be the third. And we'll see that. And so the mousetrap is Laura arranges that Phineas can see Violet alone, and she sees that as a trap because men and women unmarried should have a chaperone around. She says, I don't say that you set the trap, but you used it. But she basically says, no, I don't, and I could never learn to love you. And what's his answer? I shall wait and come again. And what's wrong with these men? I mean, they don't take no for an answer. And part of me wonders, does he really love her? I don't, or is she, well, we have to keep moving. Okay. One of the interesting things is at Matching Priory, the Duke of Omnium and Madame Gessler are bantering on the terrace before lunch. And I have a picture of croquet playing in a little bit with women with long hoop skirts. But the idea was that croquet playing was a good way for young men and women to flirt. Then yesterday or the day before, I-95, it was all packed up again, and I was cutting through a park, and there were a big croquet set up, and all these men in white were playing croquet. This is in Connecticut, just outside New York. But there were no women and men flirting there. Okay, Lord Chilton arrives, and one of my questions is, he's so antisocial. What's he doing coming to a big affair like this with so many people I know, I mean, as a plot thing. But the duelists meet again, friendly terms. Violet wants them to be friends, and Violet and Lord Chiltern are together a lot. And Phineas has been turned down, and he's so jealous. But Madam Max Gessler does two good things in this chapter. I feel like first he says, I wish to caution you as a friend that your eyes and ears should be more under your control. You're in society, you're acting like a jerk, and it's showing, and people are talking. But at this time, Parliament has dissolved, and he has no a borough or anything. And so she offers his money. And I think one of the most articulate and nicely worded things Phineas does say, the offer from you is as high-minded, as generous, as an honorable as is acceptance by me would be mean-spirited, vile, and ignoble. But I'm always amazed that people can be so articulate, but of course the authors had time to think of these things. But sometimes, don't you wish you could have that conversation? Now, we're getting near the end because I don't want to go, I want to get to the discussions. Okay. And one of the things I don't do here, but there is a lot of, is the Kennedy marriage. But Violet comes for Christmas. Lady Laura tells of her marital woes. Violet says, this is terrible. This makes me feel that I will never be married. But Laura says, and yet, what can a woman become if she remains single? The curse is to be a woman at all. And then Violet asks, did Phineas ever propose marriage to her? And she lies and says, no. Violet knows it's a lie. But she says, as far as I can see, Madame Max Gessler is his present passion. Lady Laura fires up. I do not believe it in the least. Had you not loved him, you would never have condescended to accuse him about that woman. To me, the only thing I can say is that Lady Laura is a little bit anti-Semitic, maybe, and the idea that this woman is an outsider, that he could take somebody like that. I mean, it's one thing he wants Violet, but kind of accusing that you would not, that Violet had accused Phineas of something. Anyway, they talk about, oh, she'll be children, or Phineas, and Violet says, no, I do not think I shall marry. I shall knock under to Mr. Mill and go in for women's rights and look forward to stand for some female borough. Matrimony never seemed to me to be very charming, and upon my word, it does not become more alluring by what I find at Loughlinter. And just two more things. I missed this about the first 3 times I read that chapter. She talks after this about her, that she had actually come thinking she would say yes to Phineas. He was a better man. She'd like to stay single, that everybody would bother her. But Lady Laura told a fib. If Phineas had never asked Laura, then because she wanted a lover who had just loved her and nobody else. And so Lord Chiltern seems to be the answer. And so he proposes. Lord Chiltern showers her with passionate kisses, somewhat like Will Belton and the Belton estate. Violet, to me, doesn't just cave. She still refuses to write his letter from him for his father. And I will try to do your bidding, but you must not be rough for me and outrageous and fierce. Her humor, the letter to Lady Babcock ends. Of course, there's nothing fixed about time, but I should say perhaps in 9 years. Wait a minute. Okay, just a few illustrations. This is Phineas leaving the Bunces. It's the system I hate's not you, Mr. Finn. And here, this is Madame Gessler. So you see her curls are much different than that was on the TV thing. They come all around. Okay, and wait a minute. This is the croquet party. Madame Max says the great thing is to give them opportunities for flirting, and croquet does that. Can you imagine playing with those hoop skirts on and hats and the what all? And lastly, here's some discussion questions. I don't know how to make them and put them in. Well, first, in what way does Madame Gessler enliven the story, and how are we to take Madame Violet's final acceptance? What do you think of Phineas's promise? We didn't get to that. Anyway, I don't know. Dominic, that's it.